Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, a Spotlight podcast. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
So there is a new development project coming to the intersection of Pleasant Grove and Holmes in South Lansing. And here to discuss why that location is significant and what features this dynamic project will contain is the Executive Project Manager of Ferguson Development, Christopher Stralkowski. Welcome back to the show, Christopher.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, we've talked Red Cedar a couple of times because of the transformational development that is in Lansing on the borders of Michigan State University. And then out of left field for probably most people, there is this unbelievable story to be told about Pleasant Grove and Holmes. So let's start a little bit about Ferguson Development. Talk about who you are, talk about its legendary patriarch and who Joel is and why he's so revered, because I think that's a big part of this story.
Well, I'll start off with myself and then I'll get to Joel. But the process of becoming a project manager just sort of came about just due to my level of interest in what Ferguson Development was and is and continues to be. Moved back from Chicago. I'm originally from the Lansing area. And I was thinking about staying in education. I was a teacher at the time. And just took advantage of some opportunities of working with Joel and some different projects and sort of found my niche. And, thinking about your question about Joel's as I was coming over here, the word authentic comes to mind. Mm-hmm. He really is just a hardworking, sincere business person. He's a community leader. He's an icon in this community. He bleeds green and white. Perfections and imperfections. He is who he is. Yep. If you meet him, you'll know who he is because he's authentic in every way, shape, and form. Great man.
Excellent. So Pleasant Grove and Holmes, that intersection has some historical significance. Talk to me a little bit about why the bullseye landed there.
Yeah, so it was a part of the Ingham County Land Bank inventory. And it turns out that was also the kindergarten home of Malcolm X back in the 1930s when his family integrated an all-white Lansing school district.
Wow.
So there's a lot of history that goes back into that building that has sort of gotten lost just based upon, economy, the size of the Lansing school district, to expansion, contraction of, students coming and going into the district.
So the property fell into disrepair and found its way to the land bank.
Yeah, so they had a couple of charter schools, a couple of ventures that took place in the building itself. But it is 1920s building. It actually has a sign. It was a bomb shelter back in the 50s when we had bomb shelters. And it's taken quite a hit just in terms of, the water and, just being that old of a building and not necessarily being kept up.
Got it. Okay. And so is that existing school able to be rehabilitated, or is it going to need to be torn down in favor of something more
Repurposing is not an option.
Yeah.
Just based upon the types of materials, the types of chemicals that were used, and different types of, we would call them lead, we would call them asbestos,
Yeah.
all of the above. There's quite a significant amount of water damage in the basement of the structure. There's two parts to it. One is sort of this tank building that was built in 1923, and then there was just a wooden extension that was built to the north that increased the classroom size. We are going to repurpose the materials, though. There's some beautiful limestone, probably Michigan limestone corners all throughout the building that we'll be able to repurpose. So that's a positive.
No, absolutely. And a lot of people would love to see some of these, historical buildings that fall into disrepair just get repurposed. But at some point, it's just not financially or practically or even functionally possible.
Yeah, if you think about the technology and if you think about, the efficiencies of newly built structures, to retrofit a building like this would, to your point, would just be feasibly impossible to do.
Right.
And financially, it would be extraordinary.
And it may not function for the purposes you plan to put there moving forward.
ADA compliant and all of the different types of requirements that are, and rightfully so, in new building codes and what's expected, in terms of, strength of the actual structure itself, fire, all of the above.
Right on. So there's a residential portion of this project, right? Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what that's going to look like?
Sure. If you could visualize it, it's an L-shaped lot, and to the back where you would have what probably was the former playground at Pleasant Grove School.
Okay.
Back in the area to the south of the building itself is going to be some sort of programmed housing. We're exploring different plus 55, senior, potentially veterans housing in that area. There is a lot of housing stock in that area. It's not quality, but anytime we get an opportunity to build something new, again, we go back to the new codes, the new standards, the new updates on what people would expect and what people need to live in a building.
Right.
Let's say that you do have, a disability, you do have limitations. It's very difficult to manage a home. It's very difficult to manage, just in and out of a property, going to your car, going back into the house, taking groceries. So we're going to design, we're going to design it with those thoughts in mind.
It makes a lot of sense because you're right. A lot of the housing stock on that side of town is older housing stock, and you see people trying to retrofit ramps and things to accommodate people aging in place and all of that. And it's not functional or
Well, back in the day when I was a young lad, there was a lot of single Oldsmobile Fisher Body employees that lived in that neighborhood who were very capable of going in and out of their houses, young, healthy. But to your point, our society or our generations are getting older, and they are struggling with those types of challenges. Let's just call them challenges.
Yep.
But they being anyone that lives in a community deserves the opportunities to live in a quality home in a quality setting in a quality neighborhood.
But the residential is just kind of a portion of this.
It is.
Do you have a rough number count of how many front doors you're expecting?
I think right now we're looking at anything from 18 to 22 units.
Right, so modest.
Yeah, very much so. A typical style, we'll have to run our numbers, do our pro formas, the same things we do on any project. But the idea behind this is to support the other phase of the project, which is the corner building, which is the community piece.
Right. And to that point, I've read that an official state of the project is going to serve as an anchor to stimulate both community and economic development. What does that mean, in that context? What kinds of things are going to happen in this other building?
Well, as a developer, I would argue, one, it's removing blight. Which it is an eyesore. And if you've been in communities, I'm sure you've driven by a building that's boarded up, a building that's abandoned, for sale sign, for lease, that type of thing. So that's going to be the first step. And I think that's a huge step because this is a hub of Southwest Lansing. And then we're going to utilize, there was a 2016 community survey of what types of services, what types of access to resources were needed, wanted, and required within the community to expand the vibrancy of this particular area, bring in a sense of place. So that's exactly what we're programming our models based upon what are those social programs that would be in the building to support the residents in the area that live and work there.
And what are the answers? What's going to go in there?
There's wants and there's needs.
Yes.
So obviously we have to look at healthcare. Healthcare is number one. And as we were discussing prior, we started this project before COVID, and we were really excited, and we were confident that we were able to, put one of the larger providers in the area into the building to serve the needs of the community. Well, the COVID has just decimated the budgets of any hospital in anywhere you can find in this country.
Right.
So that has sort of taken a back seat, not in the sense that we're not providing health opportunities or healthcare resources. It's just who's going to provide those. So now we're looking at more of a state local program, Ingham County, state of Michigan, looking at utilizing the resources that we have access to there. So as we build those relationships, as we build those connections to what those resources are and where they are, we'll continue down that path. We're also looking at financial empowerment, very big piece.
Yeah, sure.
We're looking at sort of equality in terms of justice to not only people that live in the area, but their relatives that have 30 years they've had something on their record that's prevented them from getting gainful employment. Something in the sense that we want to start looking at what type of problems the community has, what types of resources could help that community, and then what types of engagements are going to provide a higher quality of life for residents.
Well, I mean, it seems like that statement that you just finished with there hits the nail completely on the head. Mm-hmm. Let's engage a community. What kinds of services do you need to provide? And we're going to build a development project that fills those needs.
Yes.
And that's why I get back to Ferguson development. And I didn't mean to minimize your involvement there, but you and Joel and the rest of your squad. I think people are cynical about developers. I think people, if they hear the intro to the podcast and new development projects coming, it's like, okay, how big is this massive apartment complex going to be?
Correct.
And this really is a very different arrow.
Yes.
That's hitting a great bullseye, right? It's a blend of housing, but it also is a community service provider. It is going to be a hub. And the word that official used was an anchor.
Yes.
And it could be a gathering space, even if you don't live there.
Right.
Community meeting space. I go there to get my issues solved. And what are the issues of this neighborhood? Right. Well, let's put those types of tenants in there to help get those problems solved, whether they're public or private sector.
Right. And if you've been on the South Side, and I grew up over in that area, went to the schools, Luton, Elmhurst, Dwight Rich, and Sexton. Communities around Michigan and around the country have an excess amount of old schools that are not being utilized.
Right.
And they are centrally located within various neighborhoods within those communities, be it Benton Harbor, Lansing, Flint, Jackson, Ann Arbor. You can name as any community, and you have this sort of languishing structure or this potential hub within a community. So we're actually looking at this as potentially a model that we could replicate in different areas of need. And that being said, to your point, being something different, this is a very tight development in terms of its pro forma and how we're going to be able to keep the lights on, the insurance. We're not looking to make money off this project. And I used, the finger quote project because we don't look at it as a project. We look at it, to your point, it's servicing a need. And as a developer, we have a skill set. I have a team. I have resources. I have access to important components of how you actually redevelop a site. We engage the community where the community's at. And I said I was a school teacher, and it was always you engage the student where the student is. We're doing the same thing with the community. Where is the community at? Where does the community want to go? And with the team that we have, be it Adam Hussein, be it Rachel White, be it Dr. Nubani from MSU, be it the mayor staff, Bob Tresice, Leap, Carl, all of these people have come to the table and they're like, we can figure this out. And it's a labor of love. I know that sometimes is overused as a statement, but the idea of Joel being who Joel is, lifelong Lansing guy, leaving this sort of piece to his legacy is something that he's very proud of, and he's very driven.
Understood. Yeah. And you rattled off a bunch of stakeholders that clearly are people that are helping you get to the finish line. What have the pain points been? Has there been much opposition, or people saying that they don't want this, or hard hurdles to clear, even if they want it, it's hard to do?
Well, unlike the Red Cedar project, where there was quite a bit of consternation, I guess is going to be the best word, about taking, this green space and turning it into a redevelopment. This has been the opposite of that, because what we did was we started meeting with the community teams, the stakeholders. We started having conversations with the mayor, started having conversations with people that have been working in that area, because there are many organizations that are working in that area to reduce crime, to bring opportunities, food deserts, financial institutions, all of those things that maybe you and I take for granted, and they've worked there. So instead of sort of coming in and announcing, we've engaged the community. We've engaged the stakeholders. We've engaged the people that want to see the changes there. We've had a few people say, well, why would you do that here? Why can't you reuse the old structure? Do we really need more housing? That type of thing. So we've just, again, very slowly, very consciously, and very deliberately engaged SWAG, which is the Southwest Action Group, SSCC, Southside Community Coalition, the mayor's office, the mayor's team that actually works on placemaking within the community.
Okay.
And we keep this dialogue, and that's all you can do as a developer. And if you're not giving, or if you're not in a dialogue, I personally feel as a developer, you're not doing your job.
Right. Good for you. Well, I applaud all of that. So where does the project stand? Well, first of all, does the project have a name?
No.
There's no
we're
working title yet?
We don't feel as if we should name the development. We feel that should sort of be organic from the community. So we've engaged the Lansing School District, back to the Malcolm X piece, where we've asked students to identify what types of things they want to see in their neighborhoods, what types of art, what types of sculpture. Is there any type of homage we can pay to Malcolm X, his memory, his idea of self-sufficiency, his idea of self-empowerment? of Black pride, of Black love, and see if we can sort of, as a teacher, sort of use this as an educational or a teaching experience for people to understand that Malcolm X was an incredibly complicated individual that was a very important driver of civil rights throughout the 1960s, and his legacy should reflect that ability to be understood holistically, as opposed to thinking him as just maybe a Black militant, or, there's a, it's just like any historical figure. If you really want to find out who somebody is, spend the next 5 years in a library and educate yourself. So we're trying to do that on a larger scale.
Right.
So yeah, that's going to sort of come from the community, the name of it.
Okay. All right. And how about the status? So
right now we are just finishing up sort of our first go at costing, again, back to the developer hat that I'm wearing. So, and then we start building our portfolio, or excuse me, our pro forma. And then we start looking at what is that portfolio of services that we're going to, sprinkle into the development itself. I probably have 7 meetings set up with various types of groups that are excited to be part of this project. It's the funny thing is they all say, "Hey, I grew up over there," and it's very unique because Joel grew up over there, I grew up over there. The people that we've engaged, Adam lives over there. So this is really, I use the word organic. This really is an organically driven project that has its own life, and that's fun. It really is, to see which way things go, because Red Cedar had to be planned out to a T.
Right. Drain issues and there's all
everything.
Kinds of,
this one is again, it's a labor of love, and I really enjoy working on it.
Got it. So is it essentially approved, or
right now we have our brownfield in front of City Council. So we made our way through LEAP, which is the local.
Yep.
And then it goes to council, and then it would go to the state level. So there's all of those steps and stages. And it'll probably go through some changes. We'll have to amend and revote. But we had full council support on this, 7-0.
There you go.
Yeah, and again, I can't thank Adam enough. He's been tireless. Adam Hussein has done a great job,
and that's his district, right?
Yes, that is. Yeah. Yep. And it's right across from where he lives, and that whole area has gone under a transformation, and this is just one of those pieces of that puzzle. It's a big piece, but it's a piece of that puzzle. Yep. So
ballpark on timeline?
We're looking probably demolition of the existing structure end of second quarter of this year, and then probably 16 to 18 months build out. And we are going to phase it. So there will probably be the phase 2, which will be the housing in the back, will come up first, and then we'll develop the community building. A lot of art. I've already had conversations with some local artists about what type of remembrance we want to provide for Malcolm, be it a bust, be it a painting, be it drawings, and we're really looking forward to it. I love kids' art.
No doubt.
I really do.
Well, all the best. I would love for you to keep me posted on status, and we'll have you come back and give us an update as we go through, and then I definitely want to hear about a ribbon cutting.
Awesome. That's great. And just so you know, MSU has a link, if you go online to MSU, of Malcolm X's time in Lansing. So you can educate yourself and see what Malcolm was like when he was living in the area.
Fantastic. Executive Project Manager, Ferguson Development, Christopher Stralkowski, talking about the great project coming at the intersection of Pleasant Grove and Holmes in South Lansing. Thanks for joining me today, Christopher.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure.